Tucker Carlson believes that black people have smaller brains than white people. That's what he believes. Now, let me tell you where I base my conclusion from. The fact that he brought on a person who believes that and did not challenge the ideology once it was spewed. He had no rebuttal whatsoever. So here's how it goes. There's this guy, his name is Murray. He is considered to be an influential social scientist. He uses racism basically as a context. So this guy says, well, you see, black people have lower IQs than white people. And because of that, that's the reason why white people do better at corporate America or in workplaces, or they get hired more. Whatever the disparity is where whites win and blacks do not, he says, oh, it's just all connected to the fact whites are just smarter than black folks, okay? This was entertained on Tucker Carlson's show. And Tucker Carlson did not provide any rebuttal to it. So let me do that for him on this show. Number one, scientists have debunked the IQ myth. There's a really great article in Science Daily that was done years ago that actually predates this show from Tucker Carlson. It shows that IQ is not actually a determinant for your intellect. As a matter of fact, it's extremely misleading to think that a test created by a white male dominated biased social order could somehow tell everyone else how smart they are is really ridiculous. You have a range of tests, a range of cognitive tests, and a range of cognitive, social, and relational learning abilities. As a college professor, I understand some of these learning traits. My second doctorate degree, I had to get into it extensively to understand how people learn and why people learn differently. It's not about cognitive ability, it's about connecting with individuals based on how they are able to best learn. That's what it's truly about. Well, this person went on Tucker's show and here's what he said.
Essentially, you have registered nurses, and we have data on fairly large numbers of registered nurses, black and white. And the difference in mean IQ between the two of those is a dozen IQ points, which is a lot. It means you have a whole lot of extremely able black nurses. You have some incompetent white nurses, but it does mean you have a difference in job performance, and that's eventually going to be reflected in income as well. It's going to be reflected in the nature of their careers and the nature of how they end up. These are all differences which are driven not by irrational racism, they are driven by day-to-day realities of job performance and the responses of supervisors to job performances and the demands of the market. I'm not saying all of it, by the way. In all of this, Now,
if this sounds familiar, let me remind you who popularized this doctrine. It was the KKK, the Ku Klux Klans. They popularized this doctrine that basically taught that people of color are inferior intellectually. They also taught that women are intellectually inferior to white men. And by the way, Murray teaches the exact same thing. Southern Poverty Law Center said, according to Murray, disadvantaged groups are disadvantaged because on average, they cannot compete with white men who are intellectually, psychologically, and morally superior. Now, you would imagine that Tucker Carlson, even though he's a right-wing extremist, he would have some level of comeback. Here's Tucker Carlson's response to all of that garbage you just heard. Nothing. That was literally his response. He actually just looked, said nothing, and the guy kept talking, okay? John, what are your thoughts?
Well, Rashad, why should he say anything? The whole point of bringing Charles Murray on is to say all of that stuff so Tucker Carlson doesn't have to explicitly say it. He will, he'll occasionally pop in and agree with him, say, you're making obvious points. That's no offense, that's a very obvious point. You're so moderate, you're so reasonable. Why doesn't everyone get this? But he's not on camera actually saying all of those things. So that's the sort of trick that he's playing there. Oddly enough, in some of the shots, they would occasionally do a reaction shot of Tucker Carlson while Charles Murray was talking. Normally, Tucker has the blank face on his show. He looked angry during a lot of that. So one would think, oh, you don't agree with him. You don't like, even more angry than that sometimes. You don't agree with him. Good. This is why you bring someone on to disagree. Like you, Dr. Rashad, you debate people. You bring them on, not because you agree with them, but to air what they say and then respond to it. He didn't do any of that. He just brought on the white brains are better guy from the 90s to just say what he thinks, and that's it. And I'm honestly, again, I guess I'm the bad person because I'm kind of surprised that he can get away with that. That you can just air the race science guy, and it's just your daytime programming. It's the most normal thing in the world for Fox now.
Yeah, and they have normalized individuals like this. Now remember, he's spewing a doctrine that was popularized by the KKK. It's the same thing. Now, does he say it better? Yeah, he has more articulation in how he says it. He uses a few more fancy words than, let's say, a redneck in South Georgia would use, but it is the same ideology. The ideology is 100% the same, and it teaches that intellectualism is defined by your skin color, by your race, and that's the reason why white men are the superior class in the United States of America. And it's really, it comes down to manipulation and bias and prejudice within systems, and it's important to understand the requirement of study. You have to study systems and how systems created bias. And by the way, here's how Tucker introduced this cat.
What I do know is that, I mean, I'm speculating here, but you seem like a very moderate person. You're often described as a radical. But whenever in those rare occasions I've read you write about yourself, your own views in your life rather than just pure social science, you seem very center right, as you said, not a radical at all. And yet you are treated as a radical.
Well, damn. Tucker Carlson has just said, if you believe that black people are intellectually inferior, that's not a radical idea. If you think they're inferior to white men. As a matter of fact, that's center right. John?
Yeah, I mean, look, America's awful. Our politics are awful. Maybe that does qualify as center right in this horrible country that's worst on race. It's bad on a lot of issues, really bad on racial issues. I don't know. I think he seemed so shocked. You don't seem radical. You seem like a moderate. It's almost like Charles Murray is stealing his thing, being like a hardcore white supremacist and trying to present some sort of image that you're reasonable. Now Tucker Carlson does it by getting these glossy magazine write-ups that imply that he's someone that the left needs to like seriously intellectually grapple with. He's a different kind of Republican, which isn't true. Charles Murray does it by going on Tucker Carlson's show and having Tucker Carlson with his massive audience launder this horrendous mockery of a social scientist. So he's doing that work for him in real time. And so I guess that's what Fox is. It's to make it, white people are supposed to feel better about their racism. Charles Murray, in describing one of his books from, I believe it was 1994, said, there are people who worry they might be closet racist. This book will teach them that they're not, that the things they think are okay. That's literally what he said about his book. And Tucker Carlson is continuing that mission today.
Yeah, and I gotta go to this video really quickly because I think Tucker Carlson immediately disproved the theory of Murray that white men are intellectually superior to anyone else. Here's what Tucker said about the insurrection.
Listen to this. Look at the document. The government calls those people unindicted co-conspirators. What does that mean? Well, it means that in potentially every single case, they were FBI operatives. Really? But wait. Here's the interesting thing. Person 2 and person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI.
I mean, damn. He literally just disproved the theory with that dumbass conclusion. Now let me help him out here, okay? You cannot be an unindicted co-conspirator if you work for the FBI, because the crime of conspiracy means a meeting of the minds to commit a criminal activity. And if there's no actual meeting of the mind, meaning if you are undercover or if you were playing a role as a criminal, then conspiracy cannot be allocated to your activity because there was no true meeting of the minds. In other words, the FBI, the Department of Justice, would never list an actual undercover agent as a co-conspirator because the conspiracy theory of the criminal activity does not apply.
Yeah,
but he's superior. He's superior to me, though.
Yeah, apparently, just naturally. He unfortunately appears to have let all of that natural genetic talent go to waste. But is he dumb or is he lying? So he's a grown man who has no idea what cooperation with an investigation is, or why someone might do that to avoid being charged in a crime like this. So did he manage to get to this point in his life and he has no idea what that concept is? He's never watched TV, he's never followed the news, or does he know what that is and is just lying to make up this theory about the FBI that he could throw out there? And if there's pushback, he'll abandon it. He'll just leave it out there for millions of his followers to spread on Facebook and Twitter. So is he dumb or is he lying?
Yeah, he's a little bit of both, brother. Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.